Welcome to the Surrey Virtual School podcast, and thank you for joining us. This is part 2 of our neurodiversity episode, and we are delighted to be joined by Jane Gupta, Surrey's all-age autism lead, and we're going to be hearing all about the all-age autism strategy that she and her team are working on. Thank you so much for joining us, Jane. Can we start with you telling us a bit about the all-age autism strategy?
Hello. Well, first of all, Helen, I haven't got a team, so I need to put you right on that. It's just Jane Gupta, I'm afraid, and I have a project manager called James, but I sit within a team, but I don't actually have a team. So I'm really reliant on all those wonderful people that I work with, sort of partners and stakeholders. So yeah. So the autism strategy really is it's a really important piece of work that Surrey County Council have embarked upon, and it's addressing obviously a need that's been around for a very long time. But the government initiative of providing a national strategy for autistic children and young people, that driver really sort of enabled Surrey County Council to develop their own strategy. So that's where we're at now. We have a Surrey County Council strategy, and the strategy has an overarching aim, if you like, of ensuring that community, society, if you like, as a broader stroke, is more autism neurodiverse friendly. So it's a bit like I'm trying to create world peace all by myself, but I'm trying to chip away at it slowly but surely. And the all-age autism strategy really is, as I say, it's a group of committed and dedicated partners that really want to work towards that overarching aim and ambition. So my biggest allies are Family Voice. I couldn't do what I do without Family Voice. Likewise, we have Atlas, who I believe you're aware of. So Atlas, a really important part of the strategy, and the National Autistic Society as well. So they're my three main allies, really. And they are really important because the strategy is very much around, it's very focused on enabling people with lived experience to be part of the strategy. This isn't a county council strategy that we're trying to implement. It's very much a joined up approach, and the principles are based on co-production. So, you know, we can't co-produce by ourselves because that would be a nonsense, wouldn't it? So the strategy itself is very much embedded in co-production. It was brought together by autistic children, young people, adults and their family and carers, along with professionals from Surrey's service system, really. And together the strategy was produced. So it really has some fantastic overarching aims and ambitions, but it's a huge piece of work. I mean, it's a 5-year programme. So we're having to sort of segment it up into bite-sized chunks. Would you like me to tell you the sorts of work streams that we have in the strategy? Would that help?
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
So the actual strategy itself, it consists of 5 work streams. And those work streams are, the first one is looking at information awareness and understanding of autism. And that work stream is co-chaired by myself and Leanne Henderson from Family Voice. And also we have partners involved in that from adult social care. So you might have heard of someone called Tom Moore. He's my ally in adults. So I should have said at the beginning, actually, even though I'm the service manager for autism, I am based in children's commissioning. So my focus is really on children and young people, whereas my colleagues do the same, but sit in adults. The information awareness and understanding of autism, we also have heavily involvement with health. So that's a really joined up piece of work. So that's one work stream that I'm really involved in. The second work stream that I really take predominantly a lead in is education and preparing for adulthood, which we can talk about more in a minute, because that's really the main focus of my work. And again, that is, I co-chair that with Leanne Henderson from Family Voice. And the other work streams, which once I tell you what they are, you'll see that they sit more really in adults. So the third one is health and social care support. So we have adults and children, young people involved in that work stream. Then housing, which again, you know, we do have contribution in that from the Parent for Adulthood perspective. And then the fifth one is employment. But as you know, Helen, as well as I do, employment actually starts at a very early age.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not that we are making children go out to work at 5 years old, but even in early years, we're preparing children for adulthood, aren't we? So you can see that the work streams themselves, they cut across the whole system.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a complicated piece of work, really.
I can see how massive a piece of work it actually is. And as you said, no sort of team as such, but your team is actually the partners who are involved in the strategy with you, isn't it? And it's everybody who features in the lives of children, young people, and adults with autism, really.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
So speaking of those individuals, how can autistic individuals and their families, or what opportunities would there be for them to get involved in the strategy and the implementation of it?
So every work stream has an individual with lived experience. For the children's work streams, we recognise that might be overwhelming, and we recognise that children and young people might not feel that's the best place for them to articulate how they're feeling and share their views. And of course, they're more than welcome to come along. But what I'm trying to set up at the moment is a shadow board with Atlas to help us facilitate that. And the idea is that children and young people, I share ideas with them, they share ideas with me, and collectively we can influence the strategy. So that's one way. Children and young people, if they are aware of Atlas, you can join Atlas. They have a great group there. Every work stream, like I say, has an opportunity for children to join it, to participate in. I guess if you're listening to this and you think this is something I would like to get involved with, the simplest way actually is probably just to email me. We're always looking for children and young people because I want to make sure that children and young people are empowered to participate. And we can't, as a county council, just say the word co-production. We need to be committed to it and actually do what we say that we're going to do. So from my perspective, as soon as I came into post in April, I wanted to make sure we raised the voice of the child and young person. So we actually have a children and young people's partnership board now. When the strategy was first implemented, we just had an adults board, but now we have a children, young people's board. Whoa. So that's really, really important. So it's all part of that governance, if you like. So it's about raising the voice of the child and make sure that the child's voice can be heard.
Oh, that's brilliant. So yeah, if anyone is listening, if you are autistic yourself and you'd want to get involved, or if you're a foster carer or teacher working with an autistic child or young person that you think would be, fantastic at being involved in something like this, then yeah, get in touch with the virtual school and we can point you in Jane's direction. Absolutely. So you mentioned that it's a 5-year strategy. It's a really long-term piece of work, and it involves multiple partners and different work streams. What would you like to see as some of the outcomes or the impact of the strategy over the next few years?
Again, it's one of those nebulous answers I'm probably going to give you. I'd like to think that the outcomes or the impact of the strategies is to get people to think about what they need to do differently to make sure that they're being as inclusive as they possibly can be. And when we're talking about making changes, sometimes those changes can be relatively small, but it's about understanding the nature of autism and how autism impacts each and every individual. As you know, autism is just a word, but the way autism impacts on every person, once you've met an autistic person, you've met an autistic person. So it is our responsibility to find out how autism impacts each and every person and to understand that level of need, and then try to change the system, change the environment, adapt the environment to make sure that we are including that person in that community as much as possible. It should not be down to the individual to change themselves and to change their autism. It's our responsibility to be as inclusive as possible. So I'd like to have a bit of a culture shift with that. For me, one of the main things around the autism strategy is about equity and about access and accessibility. I think society is moving in the right direction, but there's so many barriers out there. And I really, really would like there to be a bit of a culture shift. And I mean that in the biggest sense of the word, whether it's just going to the local shops, going to leisure services. For children and young people, one of the biggest outcomes I'd like to see is more inclusive education provision.
Yep.
So that children don't have to rely on, well, my utopia would be that children don't have to rely on an autism diagnosis, that actually their needs are understood to the point where adaptations could be made and support strategies can be put in place. I think that the need for a diagnosis is driven by the fact that need is unmet.
Yep.
So one of the outcomes would be for me is that, of course, if you want and need a diagnosis to make sense of your world, that's one thing, but you shouldn't have to rely on a diagnosis to be able to get your needs met. So I think that's that I'd like to think that the strategy is working to sort of dispel that assumption that you need to have a diagnosis and you need to have an EHCP. the system shouldn't be that way. And I know that's huge, isn't it? That's a huge ask.
It is
I'm
huge,
asking
but
for.
absolutely, those things take time, don't they?
Yeah.
Sometimes a diagnosis takes time. An EHCP certainly does take time.
Yes.
And if it's a case that children are only accessing support once those things are in place, there could be a great deal of time while they're waiting for those things where they're not accessing that support, which is not a very nice thought, really, is it?
Yeah, exactly that. So during that time where you're waiting for a diagnosis, then the system should be able to respond to provide the right support. So again, it's that early help approach, isn't it, that we're really looking for?
Absolutely. That is so interesting, Jane. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most is your point about when you've met an autistic person, you've met an autistic person. And even though this is going to be one overarching strategy, it can never attempt to meet the needs of all children, young people and adults with autism in one fell swoop. It's going to be about a culture shift and people's understanding of how autism is impacting on that individual, like you say, isn't it? I think that's the bit that stands out to me the most.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an exciting piece of work, definitely a big a big piece of work involving many different people and many different partners. I can see that. But we are super excited to see the impact of it over the coming months and years as the piece of work unfolds and as more and more people and agencies get involved. So thank you so much, Jane, for coming on today and sharing that information with us. I hope it was really useful to everybody listening. And thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you again in our next episode.